Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 114. My name is NBZ and I'm joined, as per the usual, by my co-host is Bally. How you doing, Bally?
Hi NBZ, I'm very good. I got a bit of time off, it's Easter, which is
That's
always
nice. Gives you the opportunity to hang out at that Stardew farm and just keep plowing away, as they say.
The weather is not very good the next few days here in Brussels, and
that
means you gotta stay inside and play video games.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see what the weather turns out soon, because I'm going to be visiting you in Brussels soon.
Yes.
So that's going to be a fun time, and hopefully we can play some video games together and then talk about them on the next episode. But we've got a lot of things to talk about today. Before we do, I just want to give a quick plug to our email address, because we're running a bit low on emails. So if you are here at the top of the show and you're like, oh shit, now I can send an email, I'll go do it. You can send that now, so send it to Bally.
thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Please send them in. We need some more, please. I said
absolutely
twice, just for emphasis.
Look, you've got to be courteous to your audience. You know, you've got to really ingratiate them into your world. So that's what we like to do here at This Nintendo Life. It's all about being nice to the folks who listen, because then they'll keep listening. It's all about good service. You know, that's what we're here for.
Consistency.
Absolutely. So, Bally, talking about consistency, what are we going to be talking about for the rest of the show?
First segment, we're going to talk about what we've been playing. Second segment, we've got some emails. And the third segment, we've got a little bit of a news roundup. There was a Nindies Direct. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the Wii Shop channel closing down. That I think it's not officially closed yet, but it was the last chance to get any credit or any points.
Right, get any points on your account so that you can redeem them. I think it's going to be January 2019 is when it officially just goes kaput and you can't download anything. So you do have some time, like if you haven't downloaded everything from the Wii Shop channel onto your Wii or Wii U right now, that you can still do that and like get SD cards and make sure you have everything like in physical digital form, as it were. Yes, you're not going to be able to buy anything new after this point. So anyway, that's it's going to be an interesting thing to talk about. And a lot of Nintendo's online services are the kind of things that we think are going to last a bit longer than they do. But hey, they tend to not want to keep those around, just like with the Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah. I mean, the Wii U is the only home console, virtual console in existence.
Right now, yeah, you're right. That's going to be the only one left. So Switch better bloody hurry its ass up, because we need some replacement going on here. I think we're all hoping that maybe like that's the reason why it's going away. It's like because Nintendo are getting into gear for the Switch, but
they're just freeing up those servers for something else.
Yes, but we will talk about more of that at the end of the show. Bally, let's kick things off with the video games you've been playing. What have you been playing? I know you've been deep into that farm again with that Stardew.
As you mentioned, I have been doing some more Stardew. My aim is to get to the start of spring year 3, because I know something special happens then. I don't want to give it away for people who don't know.
Okay.
I've also completed the community center. I'm up to autumn year 2. How
did that feel completing the community centre? Because there's a couple of things that happen in town. As like, you basically shut down the corporation and they go out of business. And I don't think any NPCs like really populate it or do much there. But it is, once you complete it, it's all the wreckage is gone and it's this really nice kind of place you can just kind of hang out in.
It's cool. And like Pierre's shop opens all week round now, because they've gone out of business, which is cool.
Oh, that's so useful.
I'd always go there on a Wednesday. It's always bloody closed on a Wednesday. It's like,
yeah,
I need my seeds. But yeah, so I'm having an absolute blast with that game. I really, really, really enjoying it. I just want to make my farm look as nice as possible, make friends with as many townsfolk as possible before spring year 3, and I probably
let me give you a good end game tip to ingratiate you into all of the townspeople to try and make friends with them. Make sure you're keeping track of their birthdays, and on their birthday, if you give them one of their favorite things, they will get 4 hearts in one go. 4 hearts, which is a huge amount. There's like 10 hearts total, I think, for each character. So you can really boost yourself up with them, and then it like gives you all these little mini cutscenes that happen every once in a while. And those are weird because like sometimes you'll have one that is active, but you won't get to it for a long time because you won't walk into the exact right circumstance, like being at nighttime in this one area, like on this day or whatever, like when they're supposed to appear. It's a little bit awkward with that stuff in terms of wanting to see everything. But
I mean, I've been so dedicated to the money-making mining aspect that I've really ignored like a lot of the townsfolk. And
that really tends to happen, and it's a strange like meta commentary, I guess, on like the role of like business.
Yeah, I'm just so busy with life I can't socialize. You know?
Exactly, and it's like you leave this. The irony is that you leave this like job which is all about like consuming your entire existence and having like no other interaction other than like going here and working. You are then kind of put into this place where you're like, oh, I'm going to be free and fun, and then by the end of that game you're just like nose to the grind, like absolutely doing the same thing again. So it's this weird kind of
my farm is slowly morphing from this sort of what's the word I'm looking for with your truffle oils and your wines, artisan. It's gone from artisan style farm to essentially a mini factory where I just basically have, like a shed full of kegs and a shed full of other machines. And
the reason you ran the corporation out of town is because you are now the corporation.
Now the corporation.
You have become.
That's the message through this game. So yeah, I'm having a blast. As I said, I've maybe got 10 to 15 hours left.
Have you been to the desert and done that stuff yet? Gone into the casino and?
Yeah, I've gone in a few times. I need to go further. I need that lovely iridium, so I'll need to be doing more of that, and that's what will probably take up most of my time in the end game, let's just say. But yeah, making my farm look nice and neat. I'll definitely post some screenshots on Twitter once my farm looks perfect.
And I saw that they'd added video functionality as well to that game. So I wonder how many games now have that option, because it was limited release at first with like those couple Nintendo games. I haven't really been keeping track of like when developers update and add it into their games. I'm assuming that all the new game just have it built in.
It worked on Axiom Verge, and that was on the earlier side of the Switch releases.
Right.
So I can't remember the last game it didn't work on.
Okay.
I think it didn't work on Overcooked maybe, but
I
don't know. Anyway, it's useful. So yeah, I might do a tour of my farm, get a little video on there, plug it on Twitter. But yeah, Stardew, gonna keep going. I've also been playing. Wait for it. It's called My Nintendo Picross: The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess.
Great.
Yeah, it's what it says. It's Picross and Zelda. It's
specifically Twilight Princess.
Specifically Twilight Princess, of course. Midna is your guide in this game.
Oh, nice.
Neither of us have played a Picross game. Have you ever tried Picross at all?
I may have done a while ago, like just tried one of them out. I must have had one for free forever ago. I want
to say it got big like near the launch of the DS, because it was like touchscreen and it's so smooth to play with a touchscreen.
Because I mean the DS like had a lot of like great puzzle games that people raved about. Like Meteos is one that people talk about all the time. Like I think that's a game that Sakurai worked on as well, and like people like really praised Meteos, and I remember reading reviews and stuff for it back in the day, but never played it. And then obviously Picross just became such a huge deal, and I think Picross is something that's existed for a really long time. Like there's Game Boy versions of Picross, but the thing that really blew Picross up, I think, was when Picross 3D came out, because that was on
3DS,
DS.
And was that on DS?
Yes, the original Picross 3D is a DS game. The idea of Picross 3D is not that you have the stereoscopic 3D, but it's that you just have this cube, so you're like looking at it from all these different angles and trying to figure it out that way.
You're basically shaving parts off
shaving parts off it to make like a 3D model essentially, as opposed to like the picture that you're making in normal Picross.
I mean, you're still shaving off in a way in 2D Picross, but
okay.
So the initial formula is a strong one. Like it hooked me very early. I was like, this is cool. I mean, when you start up the game, there were just so many levels to play that I immediately thought, I'm never going to play all these levels. So
it's kind of like Pushmo, you know, like when I saw all the levels in Pushmo, I was like, I like this. I'm going to keep going until I feel like I'm done.
That's basically what I felt with this. I essentially thought, don't let yourself get carried away with this. You're playing Stardew. There's other great games coming down the line you want to play.
Don't let Picross take over your life.
There's a little bit of a lull here where I'm going to really work on my backlog before some of the bigger games come out later this year. So I thought, right, let's go for it. So I was like, don't go crazy. If you like it, play it. When you're done, you're done. So I was like, right, okay. I must say that Caroline thought I was a bit mad playing this game when she looked over my shoulder. She's playing Breath of the Wild at the moment, so it's quite a change to look at this game. And she's like,
these two different Zelda games.
She was like, do you enjoy this? I was like, yes. How do you enjoy this? It's like, I don't know. It's just fun, okay? Like it's this.
It just digs into a part of your brain, right? Like,
right.
And so I don't fully understand how Picross works, but you have like numbers on the side and numbers on top, and using those numbers, you figure out like how you get rid of certain blocks. Yeah. So
right?
How that works.
Let me attempt. This is going to be hilarious. Let me attempt to explain Picross on a podcast.
Oh God.
You got a 10 by 10 grid is the basic game, and each point is marked by a number at the side. So say the number is 9. Mm-hmm. You know for a fact that there will be a row of blocks that are 9 squares long.
Yes.
So because of that 9, you know that there's 9 blocks in a row. At some point in that row of 10, you can immediately fill in 8 squares. So you miss out the first square, you fill in 8, and then you miss out the final square, because either of those end squares could be where that added square is, because you've just shaded in 8. You don't know whether that final square of the 9 will be on the first square you left out or the last square you left out. Is this making any sense?
Right, because you have to have an unbroken set of 9, so you know that there has to be 8 at least in the middle. Okay, I get it.
And then if you had 7, 2, you can immediately fill that in, because there has to be a space between the 7 and the 2. So the 7 and the 2 is plus a space equals 10.
Right.
So you would be able to fill in 7 cubes, blocks. You do a cross, which marks a blank, and then you fill in your 2, and that'd be 7.
But then how do you know which way it goes? Because you could do that 2 ways, right? Like from the top, you could...
No, it's always in the same order as the numbers. If it was a 7 and then a 2, you know that you have a 7 blocks and space and then 2.
Right, so that's the thing that I was missing when I was watching, because I remember watching quick looks of this, and Dan Reichert is just like a madman, and so he's like, so I know this and know this because this and this, and I couldn't follow it whatsoever because I didn't really understand what the rules were, but like having that knowledge that it's like, okay, if this is in this particular order, then it has to be that way, that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, and it's cool, and that's the base level Picross. There's Mega Picross, where I'm not going to successfully explain this. I'll attempt it, but I'm going to fail. You can have like something like an 8 that covers 2 rows rather than 1. And you know that within those 2 rows, there are 8 conjoining blocks, and they can be in like a snake shape or just an L shape or just a line along the bottom. You don't know, so it makes it harder essentially. Right. So I did like plenty of basic level Picross. I thought, I think I've got the hang of this. Let's try some of the mega stuff, and I did a few, and it's much harder. But it's very, very satisfying. It's a real satisfying way of engaging your brain. And I mean, like a lot of puzzle games recently, I get the hook, and then I'm like, I'm loving this. And then I play a few hours, and after a few hours, I'm like, I'm kind of done with this. And I felt that in quite a lot of puzzle games, maybe recently. I felt it with Pushmo, certainly, or Pool Blocks, whatever you want to call it. Like I felt, I get this, I love it, I love the mechanic. And then a few hours in, I was like, I'm kind of done with this mechanic. Like, it's fun, but it's not as fun as it was. And I definitely felt that with Picross, where I was like, I'm enjoying Picross. Picross is a great game, but I can't bring like what's the aim of all this? So we're just filling time, and I was like, I need more end goals in sight, perhaps, in my video games and my puzzle games. And so I was kind of, after about 4 hours, I was like, you know what, I've burned through a lot of podcasts playing this game, and that's great, but I kind of want to go back to Stardew. I want to try something else. So like,
fair enough.
It's a cool formula. I'm really glad I tried it. I think the
Picross is definitely one of those series that is more about like dipping in and out and just like playing a puzzle a day or whatever, and just being like, I'm just going to play a little bit.
it's a nice thing to have on my 3DS. Like I'm going to be playing 3DS for a long time to come. There's so many games I need to catch up on, and having something simple like that in there that I can stick on a podcast, complete a few puzzles, it's very fun, it's enjoyable, and I think the Zelda theming is nice.
And are the pictures that you get out of completing them good? Are they like pixel art style Zelda stuff, or is it like full images?
So there are some that are full images, but they're on this. So there's 3 base modes. There's basic Picross, Mega Picross, and then something else Picross. I can't remember what it's called. It's like giant Picross essentially.
Okay.
And it's a series of 10 by 10 squares that make up an 8 by 8 grid.
Oh, so you can have like a really big picture.
Exactly, and you're filling up a much, much, much bigger work of art essentially.
Okay.
But the problem,
like most of them are like the basic ones. Are they just like little sprite designs of like Wolflink and Midna and
they're little sprite? They're like the bombs, the heart containers, an arrow, iron boots.
That's neat.
Wolflink's head or something. Like it's quite simplistic.
And do they have like a gallery where you can like look at those or whatever and just see them once you've completed them?
You can sort of go back and look at them a bit. I guess. It's
no Smash Brothers trophy.
It's no Smash Brothers trophy. It's cool, and I never did any of the really big ones, partly because they take so bloody long, but also they don't tell you when you've got something wrong. Like they're not. They're sort of fill it in your own time style, whereas all the other Picross games are you basically get time penalties for putting blocks in the wrong place, and it's like a high score game. So you're timed, and then if you make a mistake, it's like plus 2 minutes. If you make another mistake, plus 4 minutes. If you make another mistake, plus 8 minutes, and it keeps penalizing you. And if you get over, I think, 25 minutes, you fail the level. Whereas these giant ones are not timed, and I was just like, it's not telling me when I'm getting it wrong. So I might be making a complete hash of this entire piece, and it'll just take me ages. I couldn't be bothered, so I just did the shorter, simpler ones. But yeah, I've had my fill. I think Picross, everyone should try out Picross. This was free. Like I think it's still available actually. If
you can just spend, I think 1,000
silver points, which I think anyone who has my Nintendo can muster up 1,000
easily
silver points,
because you haven't fuck all to spend them on. So except these days,
right? But, so if you have a 3DS and you've got some My Nintendo points, I'd highly recommend just getting this on your 3DS for when you want to give Picross a go, because it's definitely worth doing at some point. And if you play more than 4 hours and have a really great time, definitely let me know, because for me, I just kind of needed a break. But yeah, MBZ.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, and I guess like the other thing with the points right now is, I'm not sure we mentioned this on the show, but like now you can spend your gold points on Switch games, and you actually did that recently, didn't you? To like get a couple of indies.
I picked up Severed and Owlboy.
Nice.
Combined cost me something like £18 or £16. Like it wasn't much,
right? Because they were both on sale in the recent sale that's gone on.
They were both on sale, and then I got an extra 4 or 5 quid off Owlboy, which was nice.
It's pretty significant. Like people are really complaining about the exchange rate, but I'm like, my God, like these gold points are actually useful now. They actually have something that is like valuable to people, as opposed to being wasted on absolute terrible discounts for games that most people either have already bought or have zero interest in. And all of them were locked to Wii U and 3DS. So now the Switch actually has a viable way to get use out of those gold points, and it's the kind of system where it all feeds back into each other, right? Because I imagine whatever money you actually spent on Severed and Owlboy, you now have that percentage back in gold points, right?
Yeah, and you get more percentage. I think you get 10% back in points for digital,
I think it's
5% back
digitally
for...
and 1% physical.
Oh, right, okay. No, you're right. 10% is way too high. I think there's some... Because 10% was what the original Wii U program...
Right, the Digital Deluxe program.
Digital Deluxe, right.
Which was much better. So yeah, that's cool, and it probably means I'll be picking up a lot more digital games in the future, especially because I just went and bought a 128 gigabyte card. So that's very good. So yes, that is good for me, but I have also been playing another video game, and the video game I've been playing is Valkyria Chronicles, which I think people should be paying attention to, because if you're a Switch owner, the sequel to this game by 4, that is Valkyria Chronicles 4, is coming out on Switch later this year.
Nice.
So if you have any interest in what I'm going to talk about now, maybe you should pay attention to Valkyria Chronicles 4, because it is going to be a Switch game in 2018. So the base premise of this game, it came out in 2008, originally on the 360 generation, PS3. I think it was just on PS3, maybe? It seems like it would be because it's a very Japanese game. It's published by Sega, and I think the developer's called Mediavision. So it's one of those games that's a cult classic, right? Because I remember hearing podcasts talk about it all the time. And the time when it got brought up the most was when Codename Steam was coming out, because everyone was like, oh, Codename Steam is basically Valkyria Chronicles. And as someone who hadn't played Valkyria Chronicles, I didn't have that context when I went into Codename Steam. But if you'll remember me talking about Codename Steam on the show, it's one of my favorite games on 3DS. I freaking love that game, and I'm one of the detractors, because most people really don't like Codename Steam, which is just a thing that I can't get my head around. But hey, it's that same style of a strategy game that is more real-time, by which I mean you have a set kind of movement, and in Codename Steam it's like the amount of steam you have, whereas in this game it's like AP, so you just have like a bar underneath your character, and as much as you move of that character, that's how far you can go in each turn, and in each turn you can take an attack, and either it'd be a grenade or like use a gun or whatever, and then you have to like end the turn. But the twist here that makes it a little bit different is that instead of kind of having individual like only using a character once, you have this thing called CP, which is like a certain number of actions you can take each turn. And like because this game is kind of set in this weird anime World War II setting, it's all about like having commanders and generals and stuff. And so some of your characters will give you more CP if you have them in your army. And so like you can take a turn with one character like 6 times in a row. Now there's benefits to doing that, because sometimes like if you have a sniper, you can take people out really easily, like get headshots and do really well. But the sniper only has like 3 ammo on them per turn. So if you run out of, you like do it 3 turns in a row and then you try to go for a 4th one, you're not going to have any ammo to do so. So you need to kind of keep in mind what each of your units has and how you kind of micromanage that. But the setting is really cool because it is this weird anime spin on World War II. They actually call it the Second European War. And so it's got, you zoom in at the beginning on this map that is basically Europe, but a little bit off. Like Great Britain doesn't really look like it does. It's like in a weird different shape, and like the rest of Europe is a little bit off as well. So it's very clearly being like, hey, this is World War II.
Is it a post-Brexit Britain?
Yeah, clearly. No, it is like basically 1940s era, because all the weaponry you have is like rifles and kind of muskets and that kind of stuff. No, I guess not muskets. Muskets is like way before that. That's like, yeah, that's definitely not. It's. I mean, you have tanks, for God's sake. Right. So we're well beyond that point. So yeah, it's interesting because it has this very light-hearted tone, despite it being about like this horrible war that went on, because it's anime, right? So, you know, you have all these like wide-eyed characters, and they all have their quirks and various problems and issues, and like generally it seems to be pretty grounded until, oh, here comes this person who is basically a wizard with like she starts glowing blue and like shooting lasers at people. I'm like, okay, there is a lot of anime going on in here. Like there's this like race of people called the Valkyra, I think, and that's where the name Valkyria Chronicles comes from. And they are like this ancient race of people who like are super powerful and whatever. It's, you know, it's the typical kind of strange anime thing going on. So it is kind of grounded, but you also have a heavy dosing of weirdness thrown in for good measure. But there are things that make this game super cool. And one of the things is the real-time nature of it is very different to Codename Steam, because in Codename Steam, I believe you cannot get attacked by enemies on your turn, in terms of like if you're moving around, there's no way an enemy can just attack you unless they're like set specifically into Overwatch mode. And so with a lot of strategy games, you have the ability to kind of use up a little bit of your movement and then be like, okay, for the rest of this turn, I'm going to go into Overwatch. And so that happens in XCOM. As I said, Codename Steam does it. I played Shadowrun Dragonfall earlier this year, and that's a game that has Overwatch as an ability as well. So most of these games like give you the option to Overwatch whenever you have kind of the opening window. Whereas in this game, soldiers are always on alert. And so not every soldier can attack you because they're split into different classes. You have lancers who are very good against tanks and kind of heavy weaponry. You have snipers who obviously can take people down from a distance, but those two classes don't have the ability to retaliate, whereas people like shock troopers and scouts both have kind of automatic Overwatch built into them. So whenever a character moves into their range, they'll just start shooting at them, right? And so what this creates is moments where you're really in tough situations because you want to get somewhere, but there are multiple enemies in front of you. And if you just try to bolt it and try and run through, they will just shoot you down as you try and get to your objective. And most of the objectives in this game are less about killing every enemy and more about getting to an end point. Right. So like you have to capture an enemy base essentially. And so the issue comes is like you have this unit, which is the scout, who have really high AP, which means they can move a ton in one turn, but they're very weak. And they don't have as good firepower. So they're really good for like checking where enemies are, so you get them on your map. But it's difficult to find routes for them to get to your goal. And there are people online who have really just optimized the shit out of this game to the point where like you can do all these maps in one turn by using your scout constantly and being able to move just massive distances. But like by trying to kind of manipulate the environment and to get around the obstacles that would otherwise not let you get there. So there are a couple of moments that I found really cool in this game so far that are all about creative problem solving in a strategy game that I've not really seen before. So the first one is I'm on this map, and when you get to a certain point, a really massive tank appears, like this boss tank essentially, and it's very well armored. It's super difficult to defeat, and most tanks have at the back they have like a weak point, so if you get to that weak point and shoot that, you can basically take them down in one hit. But this tank is like very cloistered into this one area, and so it's not really showing its back to me. So it's really difficult for me to take it down without just like putting a ton of lancers in there and just firing rockets at it, or using my own tank to take it down. And I went multiple times by just trying to smash it, trying to break it down and kill its armor. And every time it just overwhelmed me because it destroyed my tank. And my tank, if it goes down, you game over and you have to either reload from your last save or just restart the map, which is one of the other things I think this game does really well is it lets you save whenever the fuck you want. So, unlike kind of Fire Emblem, which is a little bit wary about that unless you're in a specific mode, I really think this game is built around saving as much as possible because, like I said, with the real-time nature of sometimes soldiers will just shoot you, sometimes you'll accidentally just be like, oh, fuck, I didn't mean to go there, and you'll just get killed. And you're like, oh, well, I don't want to, like, redo the whole thing in order to easily get that character back. Although, there is a system by which you can revive them. Like, if a character goes close to a character who's been killed, you revive them, and you can actually redeploy them like a turn later. So you can actually bring characters back into the map even if they've just been killed on the map, which is a neat thing that helped me in one map. But the situation that I was involved in was like, okay, I need to try and get to the objective as quickly as possible because I just don't have the firepower to take this tank down. So what I did was I took my tank, and instead of trying to destroy the enemy, I tried to make it block the way so that when I had a scout running towards the objective, my tank would be blocking the firepower of the enemy tank. So I'm using my own tank as a physical barrier to stop the automatic fire that would happen when my scout goes in range. So like I'm clearing out these enemies. I use a mortar to like go over the roof to take down the enemies that are already in the base, because if there are enemies already in the base, then you can't occupy it. Like they have to be cleared out in order for you to occupy. So I do that, clear out all of them but one, race my scout round, doesn't get hit by the tank because I'm blocking it, like rounds the corner, takes one headshot at the dude to take him out and captures the outpost. And I was like, man, that's so cool that I've come up with this solution which isn't about taking down the tank but is instead about using my environment to allow me to complete the objective. And I think that's the kind of thing that I love in games. Like, that's why Breath of the Wild spoke to us so much, is like these weird, crazy solutions that people come up with. And obviously this is not as...
having an ability for creativity.
Yes, and obviously this is not as flexible as that because it's far more kind of closed systems than Breath of the Wild was. But I saw that and I was like, man, that's really clever and special that I was able to do that. And so another similar situation happened on this desert map, where like it's this open plain and there's a sandstorm going through. So when the sandstorm comes in, no one can see you. It's very easy for you to kind of go through and get to the other side. So I kept trying to do it and kept trying to get through with one of my scouts, but I wasn't able to. And there was this one unit that was really bugging me. He just kept dealing with my scout and I wasn't able to get past. And accidentally, the turn previously, I had realized that if you use a Lancer, which is the rocket guys, to shoot at someone who is crouched behind a barrier, it forces them to stand up. And so the problem I was having is like when you're shooting at people who are crouched behind cover, you have far less ability to take them down. It's basically like an automatic increase to their defense. And so like my sniper ordinarily, if they were standing up, would be able to get a one headshot on this dude. But because he's crouching behind a barrier, it said when I was aiming at his head, it would take 4 shots to kill him. And a sniper can only take 1 shot per turn. So what I realized was I can just use my Lancer to blow up the area around him. And it doesn't necessarily do that much damage because he's behind cover, but it forces him to stand up. And so by doing that, I create a situation where he is upright and now my sniper can just shoot him in one hit and take him down. And that's the great like synchronicity that's happening between these two units that allowed me to like get through and manage to take the base and finish it off. And I've come across that like multiple times in this game. Those are the two that kind of stood out to me because they're like moments of clarity that I'm like, oh, I came to this solution. And it's been really enjoyable so far. It's also really fucking hard. Like there was this one map that I did yesterday, which was basically a boss, and it's this tank where you have to take down these 6 like miniguns around it. Then you have to get 3 units to like throw grenades into its radiators by like climbing on top of it, throwing them in, and then you have to like destroy it on its own, all the while like having to knock down barriers in order to block its path. And so like every map that I've done so far is so different and so varied, and that's the kind of thing I like. That's why I loved Fire Emblem Conquest, is because its map design was just so creative and different, and it asked you so many different things of the player, of like, okay, we're going to give you this task, can you get around it with these conditions? And it feels like Valkyria Chronicles is just constantly doing that. It's also changes the pace at periods of time. Like the 2 main characters, Welkin and Alicia, get separated from the party at one point, and so you kind of have this stealth mission where they are like creeping through grass and trying to avoid sights or what do you call them, like light kind of things that are going past. Searchlights, I guess, is the term.
Right.
And like basically doing a stealth mission in order to kind of get away. And Alicia is injured in the story, and so that works mechanically, which is like limping along, and every time you come across this certain plant you can heal her a bit more, so her limp gets better and she can go further. So there's like this built-in storytelling to it as well. It's just, so far I've been absolutely loving it. It's really, really good. It's very difficult, but it is rewarding because of that. And I'm just finding that it's just a great fun time so far.
I've just been watching some footage of it while you've been talking, and the art style looks great. Like,
it is awesome.
The world looks really interesting. Is the story any good?
It's been okay so far. Like it's kind of.
I know you have quite a high threshold for good stories.
Yeah, like there are like character moments that are very generic. It's like, oh, Alicia's a baker, so she really likes baking bread. And I just watched a cutscene where it's like, oh, Welkin, I'm gonna bake you some bread, and then he's like, oh, this is the best bread ever. I love this bread.
That's quite Fire Emblem-y, I guess. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, a little bit, but the cutscenes are like well directed for the most part, and the voice acting is really good, so that front holds up. And in terms of like the overarching story, it's nothing groundbreaking. It's about like, you know, dealing with an empire who is invading. It's basically, you know, it is World War II They even have a kind of stand-in for the Jewish, because there's a race called Darksons. They're like dark-haired people, and everyone's like, one of the characters in your army is like super fucking racist. Like, she's a massive dick, because the main character's sister is a Darkson, and so they have like a spat constantly between each other, and so like it's very ham-fisted. It's like, clearly this is the stand-in for this this real thing. So it's not super subtle about that stuff, but like, so far I've enjoyed that, and the way it's presented is cool as well, because it's basically a journal, like a book, and so every time you go to a cutscene, you like click a new panel, and so it shows you the cutscene, and you can rewatch them anytime, like in case you've missed something, like you can go back, whatever, and so every chapter has like at least 1 or 2 battles, and so you access them through the book, and the book is kind of the UI and the menu for everything, but it's really cool. And one of the other cool things is that the leveling up happens on a class basis as opposed to an individual character basis, because all the characters you get, you kind of choose from a list, and they all have voice acting and stuff, but they aren't like, there are 5 main characters maybe, and then the rest of them are just like people you add to your army, and you can just, like, depending on what classes you want and what you use the most, like, that's how that works. But you level them up in a kind of class menu where it's like, I'm just going to put experience into my scouts. So my scouts are all going to level up, and no matter what scout I use whenever, they're all going to be the same level. So that's a great kind of way of dealing with it. And it works very well. But yeah, it's, I kind of want to wait till I'm back to my PC to play it a bit more, because it runs well on my laptop and it looks really good, but I think it would look even better when I get home and play it on that. But yeah, I'm 10 chapters in. I'm in love with it. I think it's really, really great. And if you had any interest of listening to me talk about it right now, again, Valkyria Chronicles 4 is coming out later this year, and hopefully it's good. Like, I'm not going to say carte blanche, just buy it, because we don't know if that game's going to live up to the reputation of the series yet. But yeah, wait for reviews, and if people say it's good, then I could not recommend it more highly. It's an excellent game.
Nice.
So yeah, there you go. That is that for this segment. Don't go anywhere though, because we will be right back after this with some of your emails.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second part of today's show. It's time for emails. I'm going to put out the call. It's happening. We need some emails. Please send them in. Our email address is, of course, thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. We always need more. Send your comments, your criticisms, your thoughts, everything. We want to hear it. So, our first question this week is from Tim, who's from the USA. Hello MBZ and Ballyman, recently discovered your podcast and I started listening at episode 1 and I'm currently on episode 86 at the point where the Switch is about to come out. I'm very excited to listen to the rest of your podcasts and get into ones that are more current and can't wait to finish all you guys' episodes and listen to the new ones as they come out. Great work and keep it up. I have not really played any Fire Emblem games in the past aside from a few minutes of one at my friend's house for the GBA. I can't remember what it was called though. Let's just assume I haven't played any of them for this question's sake. After listening to you guys talk about the series so much, I would like to try one and actually beat it. Which Fire Emblem game should I start with? Which would be the best one for a beginner? I don't mind complicated mechanics or a difficult game and have all the Nintendo systems. MBZ will probably be able to weigh in on this one more since he's played more of the series from the way you guys talk about it. So Bally, I will also ask you specifically, what was the first Fire Emblem you played? Did you like it? Would you recommend I also play it first? I will throw out that I am not interested in Fire Emblem Heroes.
Good man.
Maybe by the time I catch up with all your episodes, this question will have already been answered, and I apologize if it's a repeat of someone else's. Great show again, and thank you for everything you guys do, Tim. well, I guess when Tim listens to this in like a year's time. Hi, well, Tim. So here's
actually, you say that, but he might even be caught up already because I think if this is the same person, a while ago there was someone who commented on the first episode on YouTube and was like, "Oh, I love this podcast. Tell me where I can find more of it and watch all this." And so I gave them a link to the playlist. They're like, "Oh, here they all are." And they're like, "All right, I'll probably be caught up in a week." And I'm like, "Okay." And then this email came in around the same time, and I'm like, "But I think he listened to
the same person
these 80 episodes in like 2 weeks or something, and that's very quick." I'm no one to talk because back in the day when I was going back through the archives of Podcast Beyond and Radio Free Nintendo, I got through like every episode of those, and that's like 180 episodes in a couple of months probably back in the day. So, it's possible for people to just burn through podcasts if they have a back catalogue.
I like listening on double speed. Speeds things up.
Yes, that's true. That does help, but I think I don't know. It's one of those things that if you find a podcast you like and it's something that is kind of evergreen, which I think our podcast kind of is, because we talk about games from all times and places, and we're not like 100% news focused. Those kind of podcasts for me are always like, if they're evergreen and I enjoy it, then I will definitely dip back in and go to the past. So thank you, Tim, for being very voracious in your consumption of the show. That's very good to hear. So we have kind of maybe answered this question before. I'm not sure when it was, but I think it's definitely one to refresh people on and kind of talk about, because Fire Emblem is a series that is very dear to my heart, and Bal, you've gone into it by my constant badgering of you to do so.
It's good. I enjoy Fire Emblem a lot.
Yeah, so maybe let's start off with the first Fire Emblem game that you played, Bally.
I started with Sacred Stones on the GBA because it came out on the Ambassador program.
When you have a free game, that's the best way to start, isn't it? Just have it for you.
And as good as that game is, and I am meaning to go back to it eventually, I don't think it's the best one to start with. I think it's quite a difficult game. I struggled a lot with the mechanics. There's not really... It's probably the weakest Fire Emblem I've ever played in terms of having a tutorial at the start, because it's almost like a sequel to Fire Emblem 7, which I think I played 7 and Sacred Stones before even Awakening had come out.
You did, yeah. No, you did not before it had come out, because we actually, in our first Game of the Year show, which was the end of 2013, I believe. 2013 is when Fire Emblem Awakening came out, and I said that Fire Emblem Awakening, because we only did top 3s that year,
right?
Because the show had only been going for like a couple of months. So I was like, yes, Fire Emblem Awakening is my Game of the Year. Yeah. So no, Awakening had already been out by the time you got to it, but you did play 7 first.
Right, there was a sale on Wii U, and I played 7 on the Wii U Virtual Console.
Yeah, it's funny that you say you found Sacred Stones hard, because like most people consider Sacred Stones one of the easiest games in the series, and I would be interested to see you go back to it now that you have knowledge about Fire Emblem, because I think you'll find that you're going to have a much simpler time going through that game with the knowledge you've now accumulated.
Yeah, definitely. I would just say that I think 7 has these 10 chapters, much like Advance Wars. I remember we compared on the show a few times, where the first Advance Wars game and Fire Emblem 7, they both have really good tutorials that are quite similar, in that it's like a 10 mission or 10 chapter sort of mini missions or mini chapters, and you play through those 10, you learn something new each chapter, and then after 10 chapters the game is sort of like, right, off you go, and mixes all the mechanics together. And I thought that systematic sort of teaching you step by step, holding your hand, how to get into it was really great. I think that Fire Emblem Awakening is also good for that. It's quite good at teaching you how it all works, and because so many people got onto the series through Fire Emblem Awakening. It's an incredibly successful game, and it's actually I found a very, very easy game as well. Like, it's quite easy to get overpowered, and some of the latter chapters feel easier for me, at least, just because your units become so powerful. So I think I would recommend Fire Emblem Awakening or Fire Emblem 7. I think out of the two, I probably prefer 7 more. But Awakening is it's such a beautiful game, and it's a very enjoyable game to play. Like, it's got some great cutscenes, but in terms of mechanics and a traditional Fire Emblem experience, I enjoyed 7. I have also played sort of Birthright, and I'm a bit through Conquest, although I need to go back to that as well. I'd like to beat that before the Switch version comes out, hopefully later this year.
Yeah, so a couple of things to add on to that is Tim, if you don't know, Fire Emblem 7 that we keep talking about is actually just called Fire Emblem. So it's the Game Boy Advance game. It was the first game to come out here. It's just called Fire Emblem in the West. And so if you find it, you can find it on the Wii U Virtual Console. And it's just the Game Boy Advance version. And it's simply just called Fire Emblem, but it is the 7th game. So that's the kind of shorthand that we use. And that is a good one for a couple of reasons, as you've mentioned. Like, it has that great tutorial. But the other thing that I really like about the Game Boy Advance games is they don't have any additional things like skills or like extra kind of RPG things thrown on top of them. They're very simple. They're like, okay, here's a weapons triangle, here's a magic triangle, and aside from that, there's not much extra depth going on. Like, obviously you have support conversations, but those didn't become a really big deal until the 3DS games. And you have like those things that you can use, but for me, the most stripped down kind of bare bones pure experience of Fire Emblem is in those Game Boy Advance games. And I think that, you know, the first one on GBA is definitely the best port of call there, because you're not worrying around about like, oh, I need to, you know, get the kids and like do the grinding for these skills so I can pass them down. Like, there's none of that like micromanaging that kind of happened in the later parts of the series. So that's a good one for that reason. The other nice thing about Awakening is it's the first time in the West that they allowed you to do a non-permadeath mode, because they had introduced it in the remake of Fire Emblem 3, which only came out in Japan, the ability to be like casual difficulty, which allows you, if you lose someone in battle, they will come back next time after you've gone through. So if you are kind of wanting to get your toes wet and scared about the permadeath system, then Awakening is great because it has the ability to eliminate that. So that's a bonus if that's something that you're looking for to kind of ease you into the series. But for me, I would say hang on for a little while, because we're waiting on Fire Emblem Switch, and I don't know what that game is going to be, but I can guess that it's going to be trying to hit as many more mainstream people as possible. Fire Emblem gained a lot of momentum recently and is now considered a pretty large Nintendo series. I think that with the Switch's success and so many people wanting stuff on it and wanting to play new games on it, Fire Emblem, I think, has the ability to break through even more so this time. And so I think they're going to try and position this new game to be as newcomer friendly as possible. So potentially, I would say wait and see when that gets announced, because I think it's only going to be a couple of months before it will be, and it will likely come out this year. So I don't know with certainty, but I will say that if you're patient and you don't want to jump in straight away to a new Fire Emblem game, see what this one is first, because it could potentially be the best jumping in point yet.
Yeah, I'm confident we'll see it at E3.
For sure.
We'll get many announcements before then, but
and then, you know, there are other games that are good to jump into. I personally find that Birthright, it was not my cup of tea, but it was also not as easy as Awakening was. I found Birthright a much more challenging game than Awakening.
Like the mechanic, the weapons triangle changes and like it becomes color based, and it feels different. I really enjoyed Birthright, but
they just add a lot of different weird weapons in because they have the ninja stars and stuff, which is just, it complicates matters. For me, it may actually make it simpler for a newcomer, like, because it's just very colors based.
The ninja stuff.
So did I actually. Like, I like the ability to like reduce stats on your enemies and stuff like that. But overall, it was a little bit, you know. I felt much more at home with Conquest, which is just like kick you in the fucking nuts with its difficulty. But that's, as I'm discovering playing Valkyria Chronicles right now, I really like strategy games that fucking kick me in the nuts and say, get good, son. Like, as we've talked about in the past, like, video game difficulty is very dependent on your preferred genres, I should say. And, like, I like really fucking hard platformers that, like, respawn you quick. And I really have found now that difficult strategy games are super my jam. Like, I'm so into difficult strategy games, aside from Advance Wars, because there's something about the mechanics of that game that, like, is slightly off with, it's like, it's a little too familiar, but not familiar enough to Fire Emblem that it kind of throws off the balance for me. But yeah, that's definitely my jam. Whereas, like, when it comes to like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta style games, I'm like, no, easy, I'll just mash my way through this. And when it comes to first person shooters like Wolfenstein, like, no, easy, I just want to murder Nazis, you know. So everyone has their preferences, and I'm finding more and more that all types of strategy games, I like them challenging. So yeah.
But yeah, thanks, Tim, and good luck with the listening marathon.
Absolutely.
Well.
And never in your life touch Fire Emblem Heroes. Good, sir.
It's a deep, dark hole.
Yes, it is. Don't go down it. You'll never come out. I tell you what.
Our next email is from Ryan, who's from Chicago, Illinois. Hey, me Zed and Bally. I didn't write in early enough for the Fire Fantasy.
Too much Fire Emblem on the brain.
Final Fantasy VI podcast, but wanted to add in a quick note to what you said. It was actually Biggs and Wedge at the beginning, but was initially mistranslated to Vix. Both of them have shown up in many of the Final Fantasy games as a tribute over the series' lifespan. Also, not sure if it was mentioned, but one interesting thing about this game is that the villain actually wins. Kefka destroys the world and remakes it for his own. Even after defeating him, the party still has to live in this new post-apocalyptic world. For my question, what are some games that have a unique twist to them, or were the first to try a new thing that you really like or dislike, for that matter? Cheers, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. Interesting question for sure, because I guess like a lot of older games had to write the playbook for video games going forward, and so there are a lot of moments back in the day where you're like, oh, that's the first time this has ever happened. Is there any of those that stick out to you, Bally?
So the first thing, I sort of put these trio of games together as games that we talked about this before in the show, but games that are unique to the Wii U, that all did amazingly unique things and really sort of blew my mind in different ways. And that's Star Fox Zero for its controls, Nintendo Land for that 5-player co-op versus mode, essentially.
Asymmetric multiplayer.
Asymmetrical is exactly the word I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. And as much as I think the Mario Maker is coming to Switch, I think that it's the best version is likely going to be the Wii U version, just because of that the way that the gamepad operates. So like, yeah. Those 3 games, I think, just really innovative, unique mechanics that I think are hard to ever replicate again.
Yeah, the Wii U is just a weird system because it had these capabilities that no one really knew what to do with them, and so they created a bunch of new experiences. But a lot of those experiences for most people were like, it's new, but I don't know if I'm really into that new thing, right? Yeah. Like the thing that with Wii Sports that was so revolutionary was like, oh, look at this, you swing and it happens. Whereas Nintendo Land is so much harder to describe and get someone into, despite the fact that like as a video game it's more competent than Wii Sports is. Like
some stuff like Mario Chase and the Luigi's Mansion game, we just had such a blast with. Like we had like 4 Wiimotes and 1 person on the gamepad when I was back at uni and stuff, and like we had some really good like multiplayer experiences.
Yeah, the problem is that you need that number of people in order to get the most out of it.
We only maybe did it like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, tops. Because like those situations just don't pop up often enough to like where you have the right crowd and you know the people who are willing to do it and stuff. So it's unique in those ways, and so I guess that's more like a new thing as opposed to like a twist, because I think a lot of twists in video games are definitely defined by story things that happened. And so, like, one that happened quite recently to me, which I think also calls back to our childhood, is I talked last time about Dragon Warrior 2 and the idea of, like, revisiting an old place that you'd been to in another game. So, like, for us, we experienced that for the first time with Pokemon Gold and Silver. And I remember, like, there was a kid at our school called Colin who was from America, and I remember like talking to him on the phone about the end game of Pokemon Gold and Silver, like after the Elite Four, and he was telling me about like, oh yeah, you need to get a ticket and get on the ship, and the ship will take you back to Kanto so you can go visit all the red and blue areas. And I was like, what? Like, because like so many times at school you hear bullshit and you're like, I don't think that's real. Like,
you
because
can
people
find Mew in the
one exactly the one
place.
Thing that people constantly talked about was finding Mew in the dustbin of the captain's quarters in the SS Anne.
Yes.
And that after you had found everything else in the Pokedex, you would go back to the captain's quarters and like do something and click on the bucket, and Mew would appear, and you'd have a fight against Mew in that bucket. And that never materialized. It's funny because like nowadays people have figured out how to get Mew by like glitching their way through the game, by doing this weird trick where you have a trainer like sight you and then you have to fly away and then come back and then you go into the grass and Mew appears. So it's like weirdly glitchable and possible, but there was no like actual legit way to do it. So that was a strange thing. But back to the Pokemon Gold and Silver thing is like, I heard about it. I'm like, oh man, I've got to figure out how to do this. And I tell you what, when you get back to Kanto for the first time, as someone who grew up playing those games and like, you know, that was my world of Pokemon and everything, it was pretty fucking amazing. Like, that is a great twist that you go back there and it's like, oh my God, I get to explore everything and see how the world has changed and see what's gone on. And I think that's the real magic that's missing from Pokemon these days, is that they're so concerned with trying to tell some story that is bad and doesn't make any sense and is boring and poorly written and has no interesting characters. Whereas the story of Red and Blue is like, hey, go become the best Pokemon trainer. And like, there's light stuff around the corners of like Giovanni and Team Rocket, but aside from that, it's really more about like the non-linearity of your own adventure and finding your own way and your own kind of player stories and who you had in your team, and the way that like leans back into Gold and Silver and the way that it overlaps, I thought was just really masterfully done and just super, super crazy at the time. But yeah, because it's weird, because Dragon Warrior 2 clearly did that before, because like you go back to that first continent, so it had been done. So yeah,
two plot twists in the Zelda games. Obviously the classic one is Sheik and Zelda, but the one that I grew up with and didn't spot until it happened was the whole Tetra thing. Like, I just didn't see it coming, and then it happened. I was like, that's really cool. And
I guess also we're kids, so we're stupid, so we didn't realize that clearly Tetra is Zelda. Like, it's so fucking obvious.
To spot story plots at that age was just horrendous.
Yeah, non-existent basically.
Can we think of any others?
Well, I just, that entire sequence under the sea in Wind Waker is amazing. Like, just going, the sequence I thought you were going to say is just walking outside underwater and seeing like Hyrule under there.
Hyrule field in cell shaded.
Right, because when I saw that for the first time, as someone who had grown up around Ocarina of Time, though I didn't own it myself and never played it myself, like I'd been to enough friends' houses who had played Ocarina that I had the significance already built into me, so that was actually, like, because Wind Waker is kind of billed as a direct sequel to Ocarina in a few ways, that is a very cool moment. It's like the Pokemon Gold and Silver moment. It's like you're going back to this place that you've been in a previous game from your childhood, and there's something very emotional about that, and like it hits you in a place that's like, wow, this is super cool that they feel this is significant as much as the players do, you know? So that's very cool. For me, there's a couple of like mechanical ones as well. There's like, in terms of something that tried a new thing, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons is a game that I think is just phenomenal, because it takes this whole idea of using the two control sticks and giving them both a purpose that isn't just camera, like having them control two separate characters and having them both tied to those two characters, so that in your brain you identify one stick with one brother and one with the other, and the way that the story pays off on that, and the idea at the end is such an emotional arc, and the way that it delivers it is exceptional, and it is a uniquely video game way of telling a story, and it's also just something I had never seen in a game before. It was wholly unique in that way.
The link between worlds wall mechanic, it just sort of changes the way that you look at a top-down Zelda game, and the way that you can solve puzzles. Like, oh, there's a hole in that wall. How do I get out of this room? I'll just go through the hole in the wall. Like, that's just a very simple like thing that you do quite frequently in that game, but you can't do obviously in any other Zelda. And it really freshened up that whole 2D series.
Yeah, Link Between Worlds is a great way of like taking something old and familiar and making it new and interesting again. And that's its unique joy. Actually, it's a game I need to replay. It's one of those like, oh yeah, I should go back and play Link Between Worlds, man. It's just such a fluid game. Like it's so fast. Like you're just in there and out there, and just running around. It feels great. A few more. I have one that I got to pretty recently, which is one that I just don't think many people know, or I don't know how significant people feel it is. But when I was playing through Dragon Quest VII, like you start out and you have these three party members. You have your main character, and you have Maribel, and you have Kiefer, who's like the prince, and like it seems like these are kind of going to be the core people in your party. And you play, and you're going through, and you're going to every island, you're doing the little stories, and going into the past, and bringing the islands back, and trying to like fill out the continent. And around 20 hours into the game, you get to this place, and Kiefer like falls in love with this girl, and he's like, oh, I want to stay here. And you leave him. You leave him in the past, and he goes and has this life with this girl that he's met, and he doesn't come back for the rest of the game. And so you're this party member who is set up from the very beginning as like, this is going to be a party member for the whole game. 20 hours in, he just leaves and goes. And it's a really cool moment that like, it throws you off balance a little bit. You're like, wow, really? The game just decided to do that? It's very bold and out there, and I didn't expect it. And I thought, man, that's a cool thing that just kind of came out of nowhere. And I think Dragon Quest VII has a lot of unique kind of flavor stuff going on like that. But that was one that stood out to me. And then one that is just a very unique, interesting thing that I didn't see a lot in any game was Evoland, which I don't know if you remember me talking about this game, Bally, but it's kind of like an RPG that is based on like the progression through eras. So it starts out and it's like very low poly, very kind of 2D pixel sprites.
I get that confused with Elliot Quest.
Oh, right, yeah. No, there's very two different games. Elliot Quest is like a Zelda 2 style game.
But in Elliot Quest, does it not change?
No,
the way that it looks. Okay, I'm getting confused.
Elliot Quest is just a Zelda 2 game basically.
Okay, ignore me.
Evoland, as always, I will. Evoland is cool because it just like changes all the art styles through the different ages of RPGs. Like, and one of the funny things is like it does this Final Fantasy VII PS1 look that I didn't fully appreciate until I actually went back and played Final Fantasy VII for myself. And I look back on that now and I'm like, wow, they really nailed that aesthetic. Like they absolutely delivered on it. Which is
size arms and
and just the weird looking polygonal things back in those days. But Evoland is just a weird, unique idea. I've actually had the second game on Steam forever, which I think is a bit more of a traditional RPG, and it still has that idea. But I think like the smart thing about that game is like it's in and out very quickly. It's like 3 hours long. It kind of gets its main premise in, and it's like done. And I think that's really cool. Any more that you have?
Really cool mechanic that was very new. Box Boy, I think, is very, very fresh and unique, and
it shows how much you can do with so little.
Yeah, and I remember the original trailers that came out for that game, and we were like, that looks great. I think it was a stealth drop, actually. I think it was a trailer, and then it was like, oh, that's available after the show. And I remember, like we've said on the show before, I like went for a run when I was back living in London, and then I was just, I'm going to download that. And then I just played like 4 or 5 hours of it straight and told you about it, and you're like,
yeah,
bloody hell, Pally.
Calm down, mate. What are you doing? The last two that I want to mention, I'm not going to say like what the twist is because they're both games that you need to play, Bally. But Inside and Undertale are both games that have moments that are fucking mind-blowing. And
okay,
I'm not going to talk about them, but
they're both coming to Switch.
Yes, they are both coming to Switch, and holy shit, both of those games are like, talk about unique twists in video games. Those are like the banner child, or children, I should say, for unique twists in the modern kind of indie era of video games. They both are crazy in a great way. So, Inside and Undertale, got to give them props. So
thanks for your question, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm sure there are many more that we could list off forever and ever, but those are the ones that kind of come up at the moment.
Our final email is from Kevin, who's from the internet. Hi guys, I listened to the new podcast today. Thanks for answering my question and giving it so much attention. I really enjoyed your responses. I love the games you are recommending, MBZ. I just picked up Celeste today. Before I got the Switch, I was only aware of the games I saw in the shops, such as first or third party games. I was 100% unaware of the indie movement that has clearly been going on for a while now. This wasn't possible in the days of the N64. So I've really been enjoying Celeste, VVV, and Super Meat Boy on your recommendations. I will check out Shovel Knight and Stardew Valley too. Bally, I also really enjoyed playing games with my other half. Thanks for the recommendation on Overcooked. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the podcast about the indie scene and how it's changing the game landscape. Also, I'd love to hear a TNL ranks for indie games. One last question. You guys clearly play games on all consoles, so why the Nintendo focus? Best and love the show as always.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for all the love you're giving us, and I'm glad that you found all those games from our recommendations. You're playing pretty much the cream of the crop right now. Like those games that you listed are
Stardew and Shovel Knight to come. Wow, they're both great.
Yeah, if you have like suddenly stumbled into the Switch and you've never played any indie games before, my God, you're in for a treat because there is so much amazing stuff that's happened in the last like decade, I think, at this point. Like, I guess like WiiWare was popping up around the time of when indie games were starting, like 10 years ago. So 2008, yeah. So yeah, there's a lot that you've missed out on. That most of the good stuff is just coming to Switch. So you're gonna have a great ball of a time. In terms of talking about like indies and the indie scene generally, we recently did a segment on an episode about independent development and the indie scene, which was episode 110. So I'd recommend going back and listening to that. It's the final segment of that show, and we kind of go in depth on Indie Game the Movie and a lot of those games there. And we might cover some more of that stuff in the future as well. There's always room to talk about it, and maybe a TNL ranks for indie games is possible. But Bally, let's answer the question. Why the Nintendo focus? What is going on? Clearly, we play games on all consoles, apart from you.
I seem to have convinced Kevin that I play games on other consoles. I mean, strictly speaking, I have played a few on other consoles, but...
Technically.
Technically. But yeah, why Nintendo? We've grown up with it and just enjoyed Nintendo games the most throughout, I guess. And then they've become the focus. I think that like... being online and knowing that there are so many other specifically Nintendo fans out there, and that Nintendo's one of the few companies that makes great games that also sell really well consistently. Like, I think there's a lot of great games out there that might do well critically but not sell that well, and likewise there's loads of games that sell very well but critically are a bit, boring, run of the mill. And while, of course, there are loads of developers that make games that tick both these boxes, I think it's hard to deny that there's anyone who does it more consistently and churns out the same number as a company like Nintendo. And it's just a unique thing about the company. I think we've talked a lot before about why Nintendo and not other companies, and it's quite hard to articulate, but I think that there's a unifying ideal and aesthetic to Nintendo, I think. Like, one of the things that we always talk about is how Smash Brothers is so perfect as a series, because somehow all these games come together and work. Like, they're in sync and they're in unison. And there is something about the Nintendo design philosophy, the idea that they're always gameplay first, that they always come up with a concept before a character, that they always have an idea before. Like, recently at GDC there was a talk about Splatoon, and there was a thing about, like, originally they were going to have rabbits as the main characters of Splatoon, and it's just a very different ethos to what like Western game development is, where it's like The Last of Us, the story comes first. Like, they write a story and they figure out the plot points, then they build a game around it, whereas that's not the style that Nintendo adopts. It's mainly, I guess, because they're just bad at making narrative games as well. Like, that's another and like
thing.
Nintendo, they make sure to cover so many different genres with their own unique twist, and that's they replicate that idea again and again and again, and they've created so many. They
make it accessible, right?
Accessible.
The whole idea of a fighting game is hard for a lot of people, but so many people love Smash Brothers. RTSs are intimidating, but Pikmin still broke through and worked. They find ways to make those series accessible to people. And I think that's why we fell into playing Nintendo games, is because as kids they're very easy to get into. And they have a through line and they have a history, and so with Nintendo it doesn't just come the new games, but it comes like the back catalog, and there's something great about having the ability to reach back into the past and see all these classic games and experience them for yourselves. Like, that's as much part of this show as any other part, is like going back and revisiting things that we missed.
And they were like the first company to really do the whole virtual console well, I guess, weren't they? It was a huge part.
And then they messed it up,
launch.
and they messed it up again, and still continue to mess it up to this day. But you're right, like, the start of virtual console was pretty amazing. So yeah, and the other thing is that Bally just has never owned anything that's not a Nintendo console.
I haven't. This will change one day. It's just never been.
We were just having a chat about PS4 before the show.
One day my backlog will be in a really, really, really good shape. It's in a good shape as it is, but it'll be in an even better shape, let's just say. And I mean, a big part of this show has been going back and playing classic games, and eventually at some point I will catch up to a degree where I will feel comfortable about picking something else up and trying more modern games, perhaps from the PS4 or something.
So I'm the one who plays games on everything, but there's something about Nintendo that I always come back to, like, no matter how good everything is everywhere else. And I think consistently games in the last 5 years that I've been broadened my focus on have really surprised me and made me think man, Nintendo are behind in a lot of aspects. There's a unique blend of playfulness and excitement and just unique flavor to Nintendo that always gets me excited about the company and what they're doing. And even in the weird dark days of Wii U, I was like, they're doing something different. And that's refreshing when you're in an industry where everything feels, or at least all the big kind of AAA stuff these days feels so cookie cutter, and very, very rote.
Yeah, and you were tweeting before how few Western AAA games you're excited about this year, and it took me days to even come up with one that came even close. I tweeted at you today. I was like, "What? You were tweeting about Tomb Raider, third game in that trilogy, I think."
Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Yeah,
right. And I was like, days later, I was like, "Oh, what about God of War?" And you were like, "Yeah, it looks good, but it's not exactly a day one purchase for me." And I mean, ultimately, God of War and Tomb Raider, I can't even think of another one that's anyone's talking about really.
I mean, people are going to talk about the Call of Duties and the Battlefields and all the ones that come at the end of the year. And obviously, Far Cry 5 just came out, and that's got a very kind of tepid reception. So, it's a weird place for games right now. All the big things seem to be in the service area, and, people only have time for a couple of those games. So it's just a weird place generally. But that's the good thing about Nintendo is that they are tied to selling hardware, and as such, they will invest.
They do not bend for anyone.
They will invest in unique, interesting ideas because they need to find ways of selling their hardware, and that's always been the MO, and it will continue to be for as long as possible. I've always said, and I continue to stand by this, Nintendo will be the last company to exit the console business. And people are always like, "Oh, when's Nintendo gonna leave?" And do that. From what I have learned, following Nintendo for this long and knowing them as a company, they are the most obstinate, fucking stubborn company possible when it comes to this shit. And they will be the last one standing. Sony and Microsoft, I imagine, will eventually become cloud services where you stream games through some other system. Nintendo, their hardware and software is linked forever and ever. And as long as they have money in the bank, they will continue to do that. There you go.
It's looking like they're going to have money in the bank for quite a while based on how they're doing right now.
Doing pretty well. So, there you go.
But anyway, thank you very much for your email, Kevin, and thanks for everyone for sending them in. As I said at the top of the segment, please send in more. We need your emails. The address, of course, is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Join us after the break when we are going to be doing a little bit of a quick news roundup on some of the indie games revealed and talk a bit about the Wii Shop closing down. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Alright folks, welcome back to the third and final part of this here show today, wherein we're going to be discussing a couple of topics that are relevant in the Nintendo sphere of recent times. We had the Nintendo Nindy Spotlight kind of showcase that happened, which was just a short 11-minute video where they blasted through a bunch of indie games. And then obviously the Wii Shop channel is now basically dead. Not completely dead because obviously it's still accessible, but in order to get anything from there, the achieving of points is no longer possible. You can't add points to your wallet, so if you have points still in there, you can still buy stuff, but you cannot add anything if you want to buy anything. So it's ostensibly been killed. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the Wii Shop channel and our history with it, and maybe some things that we'd missed that maybe we hope will come out on Switch, and that kind of thing. So let's kick things off then by talking about this Indie Nindy showcase. It was a shorter one this time, Bal, as I said. Last time I believe it was 20 minutes long. For me, this overall wasn't a super strong indie kind of spotlight, but I think Nintendo's tact here is mainly to try and focus on games that are not revealed yet, so that people see them and they get associated with Switch straight away, and then people are going to buy them on Switch because they first saw them here. Because actually after the presentation they made announcements of games that are really more significant, I think, in the indie sphere that people know about and are critically acclaimed. So Hyper Light Drifter and Nidhogg 2, and then there's this other game called Crashlands, which I don't know a lot about, but those three are all coming to Switch as well, and yet they didn't get mentioned at all in this Indie Direct. So
yeah, I think that there is, since the Switch has come out, essentially there's been this huge trend of games that aren't new but are coming to Switch, and yes. I think as difficult as it can be to get hyped up about a game that you've just seen 2 seconds of in a reel in front of you, just in this Direct, for example, it can be difficult to get hyped, but at the same time it's good to see new games that are coming to Switch and not only talking about old games, even though there were a few big name old games that were in this Direct. So it's a good combination, I think.
Right. I think the difference is that in the case of one of those games it was a remaster, and in the case of the other it was a new sequel to games that are coming out anyway. And with Hyper Light Drifter and Nidhogg 2, they're just going to be straight ports. They're just going to be here's the game as it was, just play it again. So I think that's what Nintendo are doing. Either they are pushing for revealing first time, or they're pushing for exclusive features or usage of the touchscreen or the Joy-Cons or some kind of thing like that. Because we've seen for example, games like Golf Story, which really heavily leverage the Rumble feature of the Switch. And so, I think that's kind of what they're leaning into. And there are a lot of games announced here. We're going to go through some of the ones that interested us, not to focus on everything, but kick things off with Mark of the Ninja Remastered. When this came on screen, Bally, I was losing my mind because I thought they were announcing a sequel to Mark of the Ninja. I thought Mark of the Ninja 2 was happening, and then my hopes were a little bit dashed, but not fully dashed, because now you can experience the wonder and the glory that is Mark of the Ninja.
It looks cool, but in the Direct itself there was no gameplay. It was sort of assuming that everyone knew what the gameplay was, and as much as I have heard of Mark of the Ninja, it would have been nice just for a bit of gameplay to remind me of what I'm meant to be excited about. Much as I've heard you love this game, and I do want to give it a go.
Yeah, the thing with that is I think they want to keep a tight ship when it comes to this stuff, and opening with just kind of a sizzle trailer of hey, this is coming, and most people will know what it is, and if you don't, there's plenty of footage out there for you. You can watch a whole playthrough on YouTube if you want to. So I think it was more about the name recognition than anything else, and to just start with a pop, just get out of the way. So I'm excited. That's I've said many times, is the best stealth game I've ever played. I've not played many stealth games, but when it comes down to it, I think a lot of the problems with the way stealth was implemented in the GameCube era, kind of even in the kind of 360 early generation, was okay, you have a stealth mission, auto failure, start again. And that's one of the things that made me so fucking angry at Gravity Rush 2, is why that game has such a sour taste in my mouth, is because it forces you to do stealth missions where you can auto fail and just go back to a checkpoint, and it sucks. It's the worst. It's so bad. Mark of the Ninja is perfect. It gives you all the information you need to effectively get that stealth done.
Adding it to my long list of games that are already out that are now coming to Switch for me to experience.
Yeah,
it's a long list.
It is long. It continues to grow. The next one that caught my eye was Just Shapes and Beats, which kind of looks like a rhythm game mixed with a bullet hell style game. And it had a really clean look to it, very bright and colorful. I don't know exactly how it's going to shake out, but that one looked cool to me. Any thoughts on that one, Pally?
Not particularly. I'm struggling to remember it. I'm just looking back at the list of all the games. It certainly didn't stand out initially to me.
All right, well, that was one that I thought looked kind of polished and it was neat, so interested in that. The next one is Pool Panic, which is published by Adult Swim Games, and you can fucking tell it's published by Adult Swim because it's weird as hell. Like, it's these sentient pool balls with, like, very cartoonish eyes and mouths and stuff on them, and you're in very weird situations where you're kind of like... It feels like Kirby's Dream Course in a way, you know? Like,
it's just
taking the idea
pool,
of...
Zany golf. Zany mini golf.
Golf/pool/ just slotting balls in holes essentially, right. But using weird environmental stuff to go along with it, and it looked very quirky to me and very, very cool.
Yeah, it looked interesting. It stood out. It was memorable because it was just so weird.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. So that makes a difference. Then we had Lumines Remastered. Lumines is one of those games that I've heard so much about over the years of people just constantly talking about it, and I never really knew what it was. So it looks like it's this kind of puzzle game where you're like slotting things down. It's this weird like side Tetris. I actually have no idea how it works, but all I know is that people sing the praises of Lumines constantly. And the weird thing is like it's so associated with Sony handhelds, with like the PSP and the Vita, that seeing it on a Nintendo handheld is just a bit weird. You know, it's slightly strange, but hey, I guess that's what's happening now. It's like all these bridges being gapped, I guess.
Gaps being bridged.
Gaps being bridged. Wow, that I really spoonerismed my metaphors there. That's crazy. But because we have Crash now coming out on Switch, so you know, I guess it's not that weird in the context of the absurdity that is the Switch's library. So yeah. Then the one that I was kind of interested in when I first saw it is Lightfall, which looks like another kind of hardcore 2D platformer, which, as we talked about, you know, in one of our TNL ranks, and also when Celeste came out, like, hey, that's my genre. That's what I like in my platformers. So that one looked neat. It seemed like you're kind of creating boxes out of nowhere, and they act as wall jumping platforms and things you can stand on. And apparently, according to some previews and stuff, you can only create like 4 at a time. So it seems like a bit of management going on there, and whether or not to use one, and it looked a little bit janky, but like it felt like the kind of game that I could potentially get into.
Pretty damn hard. Like it's just like that insane style of platformer.
Yeah, that's what I like. So kind of the one that stood out to me. And then the next one, which everyone is talking about, which I think is probably the biggest surprise of this indie spotlight, is The Messenger. I don't know if you've seen any footage of this, Bally, but I watched Kind of Funny do a bit of a playthrough of like a level or so, and Brian Altano tweeted like, hey, look out for this game. This is going to be this year's Shovel Knight. And it's essentially...
I mean, that is definitely what you think of when you first see it. I'm just confused what game it's basing itself off of.
So it's Ninja Gaiden, basically, is what Ninja it is, Gaiden, right? So, like, the original NES Ninja Gaiden, very much in the way of, like, I guess the jumping is not that similar, but it's a similar kind of style of side-scrolling action game that Ninja Gaiden was back in the day. And, you know, it has some flavors of Mega Man in there. It has some flavors of even Guacamelee, because there's this whole idea of going from 8-bit style to 16-bit style, and there are portals in the world that you can switch between and change it. And it looks really cool. It looks like it controls fantastically, has a fantastic pixel art style. Definitely out of all the games here that are new, this is the one where I'm most likely day one to be like, yeah, I'll pick that up and give that a go, because it seemed super cool.
I'm surprised you're excited about that over Lightfall, because Lightfall just looked so sort of, you know, Meat Boy Celeste-ish,
right?
You know,
sure, it does, but like again, as I said, Lightfall seems a little bit jank, and again, I'm not a huge fan of the art style. It's very shadowy and kind of 2.5D in a way. So like visually, it's not as appealing to me, and it also looks like, I don't know, it interested me in the sense of its genre, but I didn't necessarily think the level design looked all that great from the trailer. So I'm going to have to wait and see on that one. Whereas The Messenger, from everything I've seen so far, looks very well thought out and well designed and all that kind of stuff. So that's the one that's definitely standing out for me. I don't know if it did anything for you, Bally, if you've seen much more of it.
Yeah, it looked interesting. I'd need to see, like, the reason I bought Shovel Knight wasn't because, oh my god, that art style has really inspired something in me. It's because everyone was talking about it, and like, if this game has the potential to do that and gets great reviews, then absolutely I would be up for it.
For sure. Next up, we had Bad North, which was one that you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, this definitely stood out to me the most. It's sort of like Pikmin on a mini island with a lot of blood. And that sort of RTS style I've not really had a tremendous amount of experience with, but it looked quirky and I like that art style. And the more I read about it, that it's sort of roguelike in the sense that like you have these commanders that can't die, and once they're dead, they're gone, and it's that Fire Emblem style, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Once they're dead, they're gone. That does concern me. Maybe that it's a lot sort of more difficult and hardcore than the trailer suggested, but it looks interesting. I would like to give it a go.
Yeah. It's definitely not the type of thing I'm straight into, but you know, if it gets good reviews and all that stuff, I'll check it out. And then the big one at the end was the Banner Saga 3. So Banner Saga is kind of a turn-based strategy series that has been around since maybe 2011, 2012 is when the first one came out, and they're bringing all three of them to Switch. But the third one got revealed here. So
do you think they'll be in one pack or they'll be separate?
I think they'll probably be separate. Maybe you'll be able to buy 1 and 2 together, but it looks like, I don't know, maybe I don't know how much difference there is between like these 3 games, because this third game still looks pretty much exactly the same as the first one did, like an art style and design and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how worth it is to play through the first 2, or whether you can just jump into the third one and just get a good experience anyway. I have no idea, but it's a series that I've been meaning to get around to for a while. I actually own both 1 and 2 because I own a PC, so literally every game in existence I probably own. I think I got it free through Twitch Prime, so I'll probably give one of those a go.
I'm quite surprised you've not played it yet, considering it's turn-based strategy.
Yeah, you know, I have a lot of games to play, Bally. It's a hard choice to make every time I boot up that old laptop or PC, but I will probably get to it, and you know, maybe eventually play the third game on the Switch potentially, because it seems like a good platform for it, especially because I believe they ported it to mobile, and the mobile obviously has touchscreen controls, which they will be implementing in the Switch version. So perfect. That
I'd like to try the first one, see how it goes, and it's cool that the third one is coming out on Switch. And as you said at the top of the segment, like, it's exciting that people might associate that third game more with Switch because of this Direct.
Exactly, yeah. It's definitely a smart move from Nintendo to be like, okay, so developers, they need to make their money on every platform, but what if they reveal it first here so that we get the brand recognition almost, and that makes it. But yeah, overall, as I said at the start, it was decent, it was fine, it was shorter than I expected, because I kind of got home from an interview and I was like, oh yeah, now I'm gonna feast on this Nindy Direct, and it was like 11 minutes. I was like, oh, that's a bit of a shame, but they blasted through a lot. There was a lot in there.
It's good. It's 2018 so far. It's quite light on the first party titles of certainly what we know about.
It's because Nintendo are basically leaning on a lot of ports to pad out the lineup.
Yeah, they're leaning on ports. They're leaning on a lot of these indie games. So these are a big deal. And as we've said before, there's no virtual console or anything like it yet. And that's largely what I think we're considering on purpose, because they want us to focus more on games like the ones revealed here and those ports. So we'll see.
And I think ultimately the 2 games I'm most excited about playing are the ones that weren't featured in this Direct, because I've not played them on other platforms, because Hyper Light Drifter...
Will we be able to do Nidhogg 2 together online?
Yes, we will, yes. Because, hey, guess what, Bally? Indie developers are better than Nintendo, because Mario Party will never be fucking online, because Nintendo are assholes, whereas Nidhogg 2, this couch co-op game, hey, guess what? It's going to be online. So, yes, we will be able to play against each other in Nidhogg 2, and I am so fucking excited for that. Oh my god, because that game looks like so good and I want to play it. So yes. Anyway, so that's the Nindy Direct wrapped up. Then we have to talk about the old Wii Shop channel, Bally, because it is going away.
Not that we've used it anytime soon.
No, did you boot up one last time before it went? Because it was on the 26th of March.
No. I should have, but
because all I was seeing on Twitter was people being like, okay, I just loaded $100 into my Wii Shop points to buy all this shit. I'm like, wow, that's dedication.
I think that's when I realized, like, when it comes to retro gaming and sort of future proofing and those sorts of things, I am nowhere near like in the top tier when it comes to like making sure that I have access to all these games and things. I just I don't protect myself.
I think
enough.
We're also a bit more optimistic in the sense that we're like, we'd rather play it on a thing that's new and current, right? Like, we'd rather wait for a Switch kind of digital library of some sort, whatever the hell this kind of online virtual console thing is going to end up being, to maybe bring back some of the stuff that we missed on that Wii Shop
I'm
channel.
in no rush to play a lot of the stuff that's there. I've played a lot of the ones I wanted to play sort of before the Wii U came out. I think by now we've played. There were a lot of classic Zeldas, for example, we never played, Metroids, those sorts of games. So there's still plenty I want to play that was on the Wii Shop, but like you said, I'm confident in time we will have access to those games and it'll be fine.
Yeah, for sure. But the Wii Shop channel was more than just Virtual Console. It also was home to WiiWare, which was a system that kind of was the first time Nintendo had a way to let independent developers put stuff on their platform. And it was weird because they had all these restrictions. Like, there's a whole story of how Super Meat Boy never ended up on Wii because of the 40 megabyte limit, and they wanted to make a game that was bigger than that, and so it took forever and ever for Super Meat Boy to eventually come out, and it came out on Wii U in the end as opposed to the original Wii. But it was a weird time, and I think like back then we weren't super engaged in playing a lot of WiiWare stuff. Do you remember like any of the original WiiWare games that you were looking through and you're like, oh, this looked cool, I want to maybe try this out?
Not WiiWare in and of itself. What didn't excite me massively?
Yeah,
I say excite me massively, implying that the Virtual Console did. That didn't really either at the time. At the time, the Wii was more all about the new games coming out, like Twilight Princess, Wii Sports, and Virtual Console was a huge sort of announcement with the Wii coming out, and then obviously the Wii Shop and WiiWare later. But I remember being keen on Lost Winds, but even to this day, I've not beaten that game. And
You've
it's
never
like
played
a 2-hour
Lost Winds?
Game. Sorry?
You never even played Lost Winds, have you? I don't think you booted it up. Or maybe you did once.
Yeah, no, I did play it like a couple of sessions, but very short sessions, and just, never got around to finishing it, because those were the days where I just didn't finish anything apart from Mario Galaxy, essentially. And Twilight Princess eventually. That took me a long time as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, my original memories were like, we're the most hyped about the big AAAs coming out on Wii, and less so about the downloadable aspect. And the whole fridge management thing never was an issue, just because I never owned enough enough games. So
yeah, neither did I. Like I was looking through my backlog, and I'm like, what do I actually own on the Wii Virtual Console? And it's a paltry list. Like, there are 4 games that I got, and I think one of them was gifted to me by you, or a couple of them probably were, which Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which was a Genesis game.
Have you played that one?
I played some Sonic 2. I think I just always got up to Chemical Zone and Chemical Plant Zone, and then died on the underwater stupid fucking purple liquid shit that annoyed the crap out of me. It annoyed the shit out of me in Sonic Mania as well, but at least in Sonic Mania it felt like it was easier to control and kind of get under. But Sonic 2 is a good game. I should probably go back and finish that. Obviously, you gifted me Pokemon Snap back in the day as well.
Play that.
And then like the original Super Smash Brothers is one that stands out to me.
Yeah.
Which we've played a few rounds of back and forth.
It's fine. It's nice. It's interesting to go back to.
It was far more about historical value for me, and just like owning every Smash Brothers and seeing what Smash 64 was like, and like feeling it out and being like, oh wow, like they literally did just rip N64 Link, like from Ocarina of Time, his model basically into this game. And also it's the only depiction of Samus in 3D because there wasn't Retro Prime yet, so that was cool. So it's such a bare bones game though, because it has like no single player. I think
there's
the arcade mode. Yeah, classic mode, I guess, is like that, but it's very, very basic. There is hit the targets in between that, but you can't, there's no way of like doing hit the targets on its own, I believe. It's just a level that's a part of going through the classic mode. And like there's 4 unlockable characters, like Jigglypuff, I think was one of them, and like Captain Falcon. But it's an interesting one because a lot of the stages were ones that I was like, oh, this is actually a really cool stage that I'd like them to bring back. Like the top of the Saffron Co. and stuff building in Saffron City is like, oh, this is awesome. Like this Pokemon stage that we never saw again. And then also the Hyrule Castle one is neat as well. But Yeah, eventually, actually, on Smash 4, I think they brought back a couple of those. The Hyrule Castle one you can buy as stage DLC.
Yeah, true.
So that was neat, and it's very weird seeing like the super high res like HD Smash Brothers characters against the kind of backdrop of these weird N64 stages.
Yeah.
But Smash Brothers on 64, I own it, so I can play it if I want to. But yeah, it's tough to go back to, I guess, when you compare it to like what the series has done since.
Yeah, and like I remember like people saying Super Mario World, it's such a classic game, everyone has to play it. So I think that was just a game I was kind of like, yeah, I'll try that. And I didn't actually end up playing that until the Wii U, and like you were able to bring over those games to the Wii U for like, I think you paid like £1 each. So
yes,
you had gifted me Kirby 64 Crystal Shards as well as Mega Man 2, and I didn't play any of the three of them until I owned a Wii U, and ported them all across. So I never actually played them when they were on the Wii. I think I might have played a bit of Mario World, but I never got anywhere near to beating it. And then like I said, on the Wii U, finally, the Wii U is always just going to be where I beat most classic games that I'm sort of going to think about in my sort of lifetime. That's where I really caught up on a lot of great games.
Sure. For me, there were two really big ones on Wii Virtual Console that I had to get to, and those were obviously Super Metroid, because I was such a huge Metroid Fusion fan that I had to go and get Super Metroid, which I did when that came out. And then I remember like coming home the night that Ocarina of Time came out on the Virtual Console and being so excited, because as someone who back in the day like had played Ocarina of Time only at friends' houses and was super in love with that game, and was like, I had a huge fondness for it despite the fact that I'd never played it myself. So downloading Ocarina of Time on Virtual Console was a huge deal, and I was like so excited to play that. I never got past like Jabu Jabu, I think, on the N64 kind of Virtual Console one. I eventually beat it on 3DS.
Came out, and that's a much better version. So.
Yes, it's far superior to play the 3DS version for sure. But Ocarina of Time is one of those games that's like, I had to play that, at least some of it, back in the day. So I beat neither of them on the Wii Virtual Console. I beat them both later. I think Super Metroid on Wii U once it had been ported over, and then Ocarina on 3DS, obviously. But those were my two like big classic games. I think you could count those like among the top 5 classic Nintendo games ever. So I think that's kind of where I was leaning back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, but like the Wii Shop channel itself was also kind of a fun thing, because there were so many like neat little elements. I remember downloading Ocarina of Time. I think it was maybe the first Virtual Console game I ever had, and seeing the Mario come along and just hit blocks, because that's the way that they did all the load times. The downloading was like he would run across the screen,
it took a while
collect coins, and then jump on blocks to like signify your progress. And that's the sort of thing, as we've talked so many times in the past about how like Nintendo, when they transfer your data, they use little Pikmin to carry them across, and all that stuff is now pretty much lost on the Switch, because there's no personality to any of the menus or anything. So like I don't think in this day and age you would ever see Nintendo being caught dead doing something like that. But that's the kind of thing that I really like, the personality and the charm of the Wii Shop channel, and nothing was more emblematic of that than the Wii Shop channel music, which is so good.
There's nothing on Switch still. No music, nothing.
Yeah. There's a section of the Giant Bombcast from way back in the day where they all start singing along to the Wii Shop channel music, and it's one of my favorite things in the world, because like everyone knows that music so clearly and so crisply, but it's one of those things that you would never think of as, hey, video game soundtracks, and yet you could probably make an album of Nintendo like shop / I don't know, app soundtracks with like Miiverse rolled in there as well. That would be a great, like, there's so much weird music from menus to everything else that Nintendo has in their back catalog that's not associated with any video game, but just like associated with Nintendo consoles. So that was a fun memory for me of the Wii Shop channel. The other thing I like about the Wii Shop channel is how it was kind of organized, because it was pretty easy to find what you wanted. Like everything was categorized by system, and from there you could go and you could find genre and you could find release date, and it wasn't necessarily easy to see what had come out. There was like, I remember a brief little news section before you went into the Wii Shop channel, but the actual figuring out, okay, I want to buy Super Metroid was way easier than, trying to find any game on Switch these days.
It's charm was predominantly in the music, but it was also very functional. But it was kind of ugly, like just looking at it. But at the same time, there was almost nothing to compare it with. So it didn't feel as ugly until the Wii U came out, and then it was like, wow, this shop looks like the way that it's laid out, and the charts and the offers and the sales and it's like look up platformers, Zelda games, Mario games, Metro games. Like it's really well organized on the Wii U, and certainly at the time of the Wii, it is actually really clunky, especially like when you.
Well, you were using the pointer controls as well for everything, so that added to the kind of like, I have to drag this thing down physically with my hand, almost. So there was that element to it. But, with the few times that I had to download stuff from the Wii Shop channel, it was slow, but I enjoyed the process, I guess I'd say. Like, obviously, like, adding Wii Shop channel points, like going and adding in cards or using a credit card was probably a thing that we had to get our parents to help us with, because they're like, I don't know, money on the internet. I don't have a credit card. Yeah, we didn't, so we'd have to bloody steal them. But yes, that was an experience. Are there any like games that you thought looked like something you would eventually want to get but never got round to on the Wii Shop channel?
I think basically almost every single Virtual Console game I played on Wii U that I eventually played once we started doing the podcast and talking more about classic games, stuff like Super Metroid, Ocarina of Time, although I did, like you, play the 3D version. Mm-hmm. What other games? Super Mario World I finally beat, which was great. I think that there's just Earthbound, which never actually came out on the Wii Shop, did it?
Right.
It didn't come until the Wii U, which was bizarre. That would have been a huge game that they could have put out. So yeah, like I said, everything I played was basically on Wii U.
Yeah, I think Link to the Past is probably a big one as well, right?
Link to the Past.
I remember our friend Ali T getting Link to the Past on the Wii Virtual Console, and I remember you probably like played quite a bit with him, or just sat with him while he played it. I remember, and you were both like, God, this game's fucking hard. Like, really
and
were
going back when we both played it quite close together, maybe 2-3 years ago, it's hard, but it's nothing like as hard as we made it out to be way back then. It was like,
definitely.
This is the hardest Zelda ever.
But also, we just fucking sucked at video games. We still do, honestly. We're still bad at video games, but got some chops in here. Is there anything that you regret? I know that you've just procured a copy of Chrono Trigger for DS.
Yes, I'm in the process of trying to get Chrono Trigger.
Yes,
that is, from everything that you've said and the rest of the internet say about that game, that is a huge one that I need to play very soon. But yeah, I am hopefully in the process of picking up the DS version of that.
Because I was going to nudge you to be like, hey, Bally, by the way, if you want to play Chrono Trigger on the Wii thing, you kind of need to do it now, because like it's going away. I think you did like text me or something about that. Like, oh, this Chrono Trigger thing.
It was like, even if I didn't pick up this DS version, I just had faith that there would be a way that I could play this game in the future.
I think Square Enix are going to release that game again, as long as it's not a fucking garbage mobile version. Ugh, disgusting. Yeah. They really are.
Is there anything you missed on the Wii Shop that you think you will come back around that you want to play?
So there are a couple of things that I would be interested in that I don't think I'm going to ever be able to play, just because of the types of games. Yeah, so like the Rebirth games, like Contra Rebirth and Castlevania The Adventure, all those, the Rebirth games that Konami made back in the day, which a lot of people have said very positive things about. And the state of Konami right now, I just don't think those will come out on any other platform unless we get lucky. But those were kind of, I guess, remakes / kind of reimaginings of old, like, classic games like the original Castlevania and stuff like that, which I would really like to play, but I'm not going to get the chance to.
What about the Super Star Wars trilogy?
Sure.
They actually released, but not Wii U, is that right? Or
yeah, probably. They released Super Star Wars, the original, on PlayStation 4 when The Force Awakens came out.
Yeah.
And I think that Sony will probably get all of those on PSN at some point, so those will still be playable. there's a few games out there that I'm glad I have, such as Lost Winds, Winter of the Melodious, which was a WiiWare game that I played. It was the first Let's Play I actually ever did was for that game, and I really enjoyed that game. I think it's like such a cool, neat little thing that you can actually get on other platforms now, but I'm glad that I played it on Wii. Yeah, I think it's on iOS as well as PC.
You have to boot up the original Wii to access that now. It didn't come across to Wii U at all, did it?
Was it that, or was it the first one?
Because it was both, but yeah, definitely.
No, it's one of them. It's one of them you can't bring across, and I'm not sure if it is that one or not. Because I thought it was for you. You had to leave Lost Winds behind on your Wii. Maybe it was me. One of us had to leave Lost Winds behind.
I think it was me who left the original Lost Winds.
Yes.
And I was like, oh well, never going to beat that game. Who cares?
You'll get to it. The other one is Fluidity, which is known here as Hydro Venture, because this was back in the time when I was listening to RFN and getting into like buying more games and like checking out weirder different stuff that I've not heard of. And Johnny Metz was just glowing about Fluidity and like how good of a like Metroid style game it was. So I downloaded Fluidity when he talked about it, and I've never finished it. I really need to go back and beat that game, but it is so clever and cool because it basically is all about like transforming water into different forms and using those forms to solve puzzles and get different places, like going to a gas form to an ice form, being water, and like fitting through gaps.
Developer as a game we were talking about recently. I've forgotten which game.
Yeah, they did. So they did also do a 3DS version called Spin Cycle, Fluidity Spin Cycle, or Hydro Venture Spin Cycle in Europe, because goddamn localization, stupid names. So that's available still on 3DS, which I probably will get to at some point, although it's not as favorably reviewed or held in high regard as the original. But those games are good, and I want to go back and finish Fluidity because it's one that I got on recommendation. It's like, yes, I should finish that as well.
It was Curve Digital.
Yes, Curve, yes, who published the game you played. You
Thomas
like
Was Alone, Stealthink 2.
Stealthink, yeah. So they've published a few things, and yeah, overall, I think the other one that I would have liked to play back in the day, like early WiiWare, was Nick's Quest, which was the kind of side-scrolling. You were like an angel, kind of like Greek mythology style, and it was kind of 2D platformer, kind of 2.5D style. And I think you can still get that on other platforms, so that's not going anywhere. I might get around to that at some points, probably on Steam. But yeah, those are the ones that kind of stand out to me of like, oh, I missed those, and I'm not going to be able to play them. I'm incredibly happy that Final Fantasy VI came out on the Super Nintendo Classic, because otherwise I would have definitely been bummed because I'm in London right now, I don't have my Wii, so I kind of missed the deadline to like get any last minute stuff if I wanted to. I just wouldn't have been able to, and if I'd known that and had missed out on getting Final Fantasy VI, I would have been like super bummed out, because there's just so few good ways to play that game, and the Super Nintendo Classic is finally a good way, and we both played it on that, so yay, that was good. So yeah, I guess that's it. That's the Wii Shop channel. Rest in peace, buddy. Still open until January next year, but
and
it will be going
Wii
away.
Shop is still going strong. There's loads of games on that. Not as many.
Not as many. Yeah, not as many ones that we would like to. Like Final Fantasy VI is stranded, and so is Chrono Trigger, and so is like all these other like more niche games too that you're just not going to be able to get to. One that actually came over, which I still intend to get to, and I've actually bought it now through the internet as opposed to on my Wii U itself. But Sin and Punishment for N64 is one that I need to go back and play, and that is now I now own it on Wii U, so I will play that at some point. So yeah, there's lots of classic games still around that we need to get to. It's starting to get more esoteric, I guess, for me especially, is like, okay, where are the like more deep cut weird games? When am I going to play Demon's Crest Ballet is what I'm really wondering, because this is the game that RFN constantly fucking talks about, that I need to probably play at some point.
Yeah, they love a deep dive.
Yes, they do. So anyway, that's probably going to wrap us up for this here episode. Thank you all so much for listening. It's been a fun show, been a fun time. Bali, we are doing a new TNL Ranks, which will be our next Patreon show. Do you want to tell the fine folks what we're going to be talking about?
We are going to do our top 5 video game consoles of all time. We're going to do list of 5 each. Episode 3, TNL Ranks. It's for our $2 tier patrons. So if you want to listen to that, we'd gladly appreciate your support on the $2 tier, and you can download all those TNL Ranks episodes. So that'll be coming out a week from today that this goes out. So if you're listening to this on Monday, it will come out a week today. And MBZ is actually going to be in Brussels next weekend, so we're going to record it then.
We're going to have a bit of an in-person recording. Fun times.
Make sure to get a bit of Smash Brothers in.
Yeah.
Might get a bit of co-op games like Overcooked and Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time on the go. So,
and gonna try and beat Contra together on the Super Nintendo Classic.
That's gonna be hard. Yep. Is Contra 3 harder than 1 and 2?
I feel like it probably is. I feel like we're gonna die.
Or is it all just one hot mess?
It's a big hot mess. It's a fun hot mess, but my God, I'm excited to just die in Contra a lot. It's gonna be good. And yes, Bally, we also have our top patrons to thank.
I'd like to thank our 2 top tier patrons, our $10 tier patrons. They are, of course, Atari Alex and my girlfriend Caroline. So thank you for your top tier support.
Of course, you can all go over to patreon.com/thisnintendolife if you'd like to support us, and starting to build up quite a backlog of like episodes of TNL Ranks and TNL Takes, so we can have lots of things to listen to as you go along. You can also find our YouTube channel, youtube.com/thisnintendolife, where episodes go up every Friday of the week that they go live.
With timestamps.
Yes, with timestamps, of course. And check out our Discord channel, which you can find by going to our Twitter account, which is, Bally?
At TNL Podcast. That's at TNL Podcast. It's the best place to go to find all these Patreon episodes and our Discord server and finding out exactly when the show's coming out and all those things.
Absolutely. Where can people find you on the internet, Bally?
Please find me on Twitter. I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. Been tweeting about loads recently.
Or finishing up your Stardew and all that good stuff.
Finishing up Stardew, getting on to bigger, brighter things.
Yeah, you can find me at LordNBZ on the Twitters. You can also email us at our email address, which is, Bally?
thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. We always need more emails. We'd really appreciate.
Particularly now, we need some, so please send them
now.
for next time. That would be very helpful. And I think that pretty much closes us out. Any last words here, Bally?
I look forward to settling this in Smash when you come to Brussels.
Yes, we shall settle many things in Smash. Oh, you know what I just remembered that has really pissed me off? You never bought the fucking DLC, so I can't play as Cloud. You're a motherfucker. You're a motherfucker. No, I'm very. Buy it. We could do. Like the Switch version. That's one of my biggest worries is Smash Brothers for Switch is not going to have Cloud, and I'm very nervous about that because Cloud is like my new main who I really like playing as.
What if it has Sabin?
Oh boy, that would be good. Fuck. Oh no, man! Now you put that in my brain. Now I want that more than anything.
Right here, right now.
Yep. Absolutely. Just replace Ryu with Sabin. He's a much better character than fucking Ryu. Anyway, that's going to wrap us up. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the next episode of This Nintendo Life. Goodbye, folks. The musical interludes used on today's show were A Moment of Relief from Valkyria Chronicles, copyright Sega 2008, and The Wii Shop Channel Music from The Wii Shop Channel, copyright Nintendo 2006.